Okay. Hey everybody, welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about using effects with jQuery, and we're going to talk also about chaining effects, so you can use multiple effects with jQuery. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to build on the last example that we did, and what I've got, I've changed the style sheet just a little bit, but we've got 6 links here, and when I click on one of these, what it's going to do is it's going to load some external content into a target div over here on the right. So real quick, let's look at the HTML and see what we got going on here. This is the HTML document, and it's real simple. Basically, I'm using the grid system in here, 960, and what we've got here is we've got a div with the class of grid4, which contains my links, and you can see that there are 6 of these. Each one of them have a unique ID, so we can address them in the JavaScript file. So we have link 1, link 2, link 3, link 4, link 5, and link 6. And then it's real simple. We have a div down here with the class, it's a grid8, and we gave this the ID of target. Okay, so this is where our external content is going to load. Real quick, if you look over at the file structure here, you can see I have my content folder, and inside that I have 6 HTML documents. And if you open any one of these, they contain basically an image and a paragraph describing, you know, what the link was about, and that's what's going to load into that target div. So this is what we did in the last movie. So if you haven't watched that, you might want to go check that out so you can kind of see I've changed the design just a little bit, but the functionality is still all identical to what we did in the last one. So when I click on one of these, basically it will load that content. I've also just used beefed up the CSS3 a little bit, and I've just used a transition and a selected state. Okay, now also what we did in the last movie, let's go back over here once again, is let's look at the scripts.js file. So here's our JavaScripts. Okay, so what we're doing is we're working with this jQuery framework, and we're on the set on load callback, we're feeding some functions to it. The first one we did, just to review, was we took basically any any link that's in the nav class div, anything that's inside there, and we do 2 things. What we're going to do is we're going to take all of those links and remove the class of selected. So if it's selected, we're going to remove that. And then what we're going to do is take the one we clicked on, which is specified by using the word this, and we're going to add the class selected. Okay, so this resets it. This first line resets. Anytime a link is clicked on, it takes the selected class off of all of them. It's really only on one, but we're catching them all in one statement there. And then we're going to add that class again to the one we just clicked on. And that's what allows us, let's go back and look, to when I click on each one of these, it adds that class in. And via CSS3, I added a transition in there. And what we're going to do is work on some effects and transitions, but instead of using CSS3, when we load our content, we're going to use jQuery inside that. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we've, on the second line here, or the second chunk of code here, we've taken the $, the ID of link 1, and we've added a click function. So when that link is clicked, this function is fired. And this function basically says take the target div, or the pound target, because that's the ID, and load content, and then file number 1.html. And so what we would do is to do this for each of the 6 links, and I've numbered them accordingly, we would just simply, you can cut and paste this even. So if I select all that, let's copy, let's paste that in. Instead of link 1, let's say now it's link 2, and when that's clicked, it's going to load up content / file2.html. So if we go back over to Safari, I'm going to reload, and here now when I click on this first one, the first one loads, click on the second one, and the second one loads, and I would repeat this for the next 4. So we would have all 6 working. Okay, so what I want to do is use jQuery just to add a little bit of animation. And what I want to do is when one of these links is clicked on, much like we're doing with this CSS3 transition, is what I want to do is take the content, fade that down, load the new content, and then fade it back up. Okay, with the new content. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let's open a new tab, and I'm going to go to jQuery's website here. And I'm showing you this so you can look these things up. And if I go to documentation, what I'm going to do is scroll down over here. And there's 2 places you can find this, but on the main window here under this jQuery API reference, what I'm going to do is click on effects. Excuse me, I clicked on events. Let's click on effects. Okay. All right, so here's all the effects that are available. There's an animation effect, clear cue, delay, etc. And you can kind of read through these. They all work in a very similar fashion. So if you want to try something different than what I've used in this example, work through the example with me, and then you can try something else and figure out what it does. But the one we're going to do is we're going to be concentrating with these fade out and fade to, fade in. We're going to deal with some fades here because I just want the content to fade out, load new content, content and then fade it back in. So the first one I'm going to look at is fade out, okay? And this is the first one we're going to deal with. And when I look down here, it tells me that fade out, it allows several arguments to be passed through this function, which is built into jQuery. The first one is the duration, so you can specify exactly what duration you want, and you can also have a callback, and we'll talk about that in just a second. You can also, there's a third one for easing, so you can actually control how that animation looks, much like we did with CSS3. You can ease it in and out, and you can actually, rather than have it, when you fade out, it does it just in a consistent time, it fades it out, and then you can change that to start fast and end up slow as you're going, things like that. We're just going to keep this simple right now, and we're going to deal with this prime example up here, which is duration and callback. And you can scroll down if you need to see, and this helps me a lot, if you need to see an example of exactly how this is set up. So, on the click me, once that's clicked, the book layer or whatever the idea of book is, it fades out. And see, they're using slow, and then they're passing a second function. Don't worry about that right now. We're just going to deal with the first one. So let's come back over to our code, and what we're going to do is let's do it on the first link. What we're going to do, let's drop a line before it loads, and what we're going to do is specify the target, so $, and then the ID of target. Okay, and what we want to do is say dot fade out, capital O and out. We're going to say fade out, and then in parentheses, I'm just going to, in little quotes, say fast. And you can denote, let's put a semicolon after that, you can say you can fade out fast or slow, and these basically grab two numbers and do it fast or slow. You can actually go in and specify the number of milliseconds, so if you really want to get anal retentive and controlling over that. Okay, so all I've done right above the load statement, as I've said for the ID of target, go ahead and fade it out, and we're going to use fast as our parameter in there. So we're going to say target, fade out, fast. Okay, so let's see what that looks like right now. Let's go back over to Safari. Let's reload our example page. And remember, this is only going to work on the first link. And you're not going to see, you saw the fade out. It did it pretty quick. And what happened was, let's reload that so you can see it again. When I click on the first link, you're going to see it fade out real fast. Okay. That's because what I've done is I've said fade it out, and then the next line I've said load the content, and I've never told it to fade back in. So, and even when I click on other links and come back, because it's targeting that ID of target, our div it's called target, it never fades back in. So it did load the content, we can't see it. So this becomes a little confusing because you want to trigger a multiple series of events here that are going to go down. First thing you want to do is fade it out, then you want to load content, and then technically we want to fade it back in. What happens if it fades out and then fades back in before the content is loaded? Let's say we had a big file here with a lot of images in it. Well, that can be tricky because then you miss the effect. It faded in before that was loaded, so you just see it load in. So what we want to do is we want to basically tell our document that we want to do this series of effects and events here that happen, but we want them to do in series. So don't do the next one until the first one's complete. Okay? And that may be a little confusing, but let's pop back over here to this jQuery API reference. And that's what the callback is. So we have, the function of fade out here, dot fade out. We get two arguments, a duration and a callback. And that callback basically says when this is complete, do the next thing. So we can start chaining events together. Let me show you how to do that. Let's come back over to our JavaScript here. And what I want to do here, let's drop a couple lines here so we don't get mixed up here. Let's take this target.fadeout. We're going to say fast. And then what I'm going to do is add the callback function. So what we're going to do is say comma. And then I'm going to say what happens on the callback. What it's going to do is another function. Okay, remember your syntax here is very important. So when you open parentheses, make sure you close them. When you open curly braces, make sure you close them. I know you're getting tired of hearing me say that. So we're going to do open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and then we're going to do our curly braces. Okay, and we're going to drop a line between the curly braces to keep this clean. Okay, so now we are specifying what happens on that callback. And what we're going to say here is I'm just going to cut and paste what we already had, this target.load. Let's cut that and let's paste it up here. And so now it's saying, and we won't notice a visual difference yet, but just wait. What we're saying now is on the when link 1 is clicked, take the target div, we're going to fade it out. It's going to fade out fast. Once that's done, you're going to call this function, which is going to take the target div again, and it's going to load the content. Now we need to fade it back up, because right now we're not going to be able to see anything because the opacity is now set to nothing. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, as you probably are guessing, is on this load function, it also supports a callback. So basically, after what we're going to load, which is the content, I'm going to put a comma. Then we're going to put function again. Okay, now we're wrapping functions inside of functions, so make sure your syntax is clean. If this doesn't work, you probably don't have clean syntax or you have a mistake somewhere. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Open curly brace, close curly brace. I'm going to drop a line down. And what we're going to do now is in here, this is what happens once that load is completed. And what we're going to do is, you probably guessed it already, we're going to say $, parentheses, single quotes, pound target. So the target layer here is going to, what we're going to do is say now fade in, which is actually, if we go back over to our jQuery page, fade in. Let's go to the back button here. Let's say, okay, so here's fade in. We can also say fade to if we want to fade to something that's not quite 100% opacity. We're going to use fade in because we're just going to keep these simple, bring it back up all the way. And again, duration and callback are the two arguments that I'm going to feed into the fade in function. So let's go back over here. I'm going to say fade in, and then in parentheses, single quotes, let's say slow on the fade in, so we can see the difference. It's going to fade out fast and fade in slow. And then I'm going to, I don't need a callback function here because nothing else happens. So once that's done, it's complete. So we just need a semicolon at the end of that statement. Okay? So real quick, we've wrapped functions inside of functions, and don't let this be confusing to you. Let me bring this back up because you're seeing a lot of empty space there so we can see how that whole thing closes. Okay, so what we're dealing with is this chunk of code here. We're saying when the ID of link 1, when that is clicked on, we're going to fire the following function. First of all, the target ID div, it's going to fade out. It's going to fade out fast, and then comma, the callback. When that's done, we're going to fire a second function. That function is going to say take that same target, and we're going to load this external content, which is content/1.html, which is this file up here. And when that's done, so the comma, this denotes the callback. And remember, that's what a callback is once it's complete, then something else happens. Comma, function. And then, so we've had a third function wrapped into the first. And we're going to say basically that same target div, we're going to say fade in now, and it's going to fade in slow. So we fade it out fast, we load the new content. When that's complete, we fade it back in. So let's look at that, see how that works. Let's come back over here, and let's refresh our example page. And now when I click this first link, it fades the content in with new content, okay? And so we're going to have to repeat this for each of these steps here. So let me come back here. And we have link 2 down here. It's really easy to make the change here. What I'm going to do here is we're just going to, select the link 1 functions here. And let's come down, and I'm going to paste this in 6 times, 5, 6. And all you have to do here is make sure you change 2 things. It's going to be from link 1 to link 2, and the content is now going to be page 2. We're going to make this link 3. The content is going to be 3.html. This is going to be 4. The content is going to be 4.html. So you can see this goes pretty quick. And we're going to do 5. The content is going to be 5.html. And then finally, we're going to say link 6. And this is going to be 6.html. Now, when you've gotten a little more familiar with programming in jQuery, it is going to be more efficient to write a custom function that does all this, that allows us just to feed in that number. And that way we don't have to do all this code 6 times. This is probably inefficient, but since we're just learning this now, this will guarantee that this works. So let's come back over, let's reload the page, and now you can see when I click on each one of these links, the fade out is fast, the fade in is slow, and it does it in order. So if you had large content here, this is why you want to fire these events in sequence. You don't want them to happen faster than your computer can display them, because then you won't notice the effects. So basically we're chaining a bunch of events together. So when I click on something, it's going to fade the first one out, load the new one, and then fade the next one in. And you can go in and adjust the parameters on here. So if you want the slow fade out instead of a fast fade out, you could change that. If you wanted to go in and actually tweak it to the number of milliseconds, you could do that. There are other effects too, if you go back over here to this jQuery API, that you can read about. So if you wanted to go in and maybe you just wanted to hide it and not even fade it down, you could do that. If you wanted to do some toggles, you could do that. There's also animate functions, which open up a whole bunch of new doors. So you could add add other things there. But this is basically how this works. So we've covered effects, this fade out, fade in business. Load was from the previous video that we watched here. And basically what I did is I chained them together into a sequence. And you do that by using the callback. The callback is the second argument inside the function. And we actually nested a bunch of them in one another. So you could run into problems here, and so make sure that you just got all your parentheses opened and closed correctly. You've got your commas in the right place, and you don't have any strange errors according to that. Now there's one more thing I want to do to this, and we're actually going to break this into the next movie, but the problem here is when I reload the page, and I've had people ask me about this, there is no placeholder content. So this may or may not be a good thing. You perhaps want this to be blank so you can go ahead and invite the website visitors to start clicking on things, but you may want to have this first one already selected. So in the next film, we'll talk about how to do that. So anyway, that's all for now, and I will go ahead and see you in the next episode.